pretty big. We know that the New York Giants, they're going all in with Daniel Jones. They go out of their way and they give Daniel Jones a really nice contract a few weeks ago. But the question was, how the hell were they going to give him weapons? Because if you look at this year's free agent wide receiver class, you really don't have anybody. You have like DJ Chark, you had Jacoby Myers, but really nobody's going to be available. So you didn't know, okay, were they going to go out of their way and draft a rookie in the first round, which they may very easily still do? Or are they going to try to find a way to trade for T. Higgins? But how are you going to pay Daniel Jones, franchise tag Saquon Barkley, and then still afford T. Higgins? There's a lot up in the air. Difficult to figure out how exactly they were going to improve this weaponry for Daniel Jones, which they definitely needed to. And they go out there and they get Darren Waller. I'm actually very excited about this. Reminds me a lot of prime Evan Ingram. Back, if you remember, Evan Ingram as a rookie and a second-year player for the New York Giants. I think Darren Waller fits a lot in this offense. I understand it's a different quarterback. I understand that it's a different coaching staff. But if we're going to go through and look at the type of tight end Darren Waller is, in my mind, he's the perfect fit for Daniel Jones. But before we get into anything here, of course, go down there, drop a like on this. And if you want to get access to any of my fantasy football rankings, which we will have to update after this trade, regardless of if it's one quarterback dynasty, just 2023 rankings, or if you want to get exclusive articles, videos, live streams, if you want to get into the Discord chat, if you want yours truly to make a podcast of your fantasy football team, and you also get all of that minus the podcast from Fantasy Stock Exchange, Dynasty Land Football, and Fantasy Endgame. You can find the link to Flock Fantasy in the description. When you sign up for Flock Fantasy with promo code Flock, you're going to get 30% off any subscription. And like I said, I will go ahead and make a podcast of your fantasy football team. But let's go through and let's look at why, in my mind, this makes a lot of sense for the New York Giants and Darren Waller. And we have to address a few things. Darren Waller has been a tight end in years past that has been able to command volume. Darren Waller in years past has been the pseudo wide receiver one in his own offense. So I want to go through and I want to look at some of those Raiders teams because we all remember, the Darren Waller season this past year where you had Davante Adams there dominating with targets, and Darren Waller was very, very bad, if we're going to be honest. He was a horrible fantasy football pick. And if we're going to go through and look at these Raiders statistics, you can clearly see this. But we need to not only look at what we had this past season from the Las Vegas Raiders, we need to go back to what we had before Davante Adams got there, before you had serious wide receiver target competition. Because if we pivot over here, we'll get to an underdog draft in just 1 minute, but you are going to look at Davante Adams, 180 targets, Matt Collins, 94. Darren Waller giving you nothing, plays half the season, and even in the games he does play, not great, sitting at 43 receiving yards per game. Not really excited about what you had there, but like I said, that's when you actually had weapons with the Las Vegas Raiders, and more importantly, just Davante Adams there. So if we're going to go through and look at some previous seasons where you really didn't have those weapons surrounding Derek Carr outside of Darren Waller, yes, if you're looking at the totals here, you are going to see that Hunter Renfrow did command more targets than Darren Waller the year prior, but you also have to keep in mind that Hunter Renfrow ended up playing 17 games compared to Darren Waller at 11. So if we're going to go through and look at a target share perspective, Darren Waller was actually able to average about 8.5 targets per game this year compared to Hunter Renfrow, who looks like he's sitting there at the very top. Hunter Renfrow was down at 7.5. So we've seen Darren Waller last year lead his team in targets. And if we go back to 2020, before you even had the Hunter Renfrow full-blown breakout, remember how excited about Hunter Renfrow people ended up being. We are going to see that Darren Waller yet again show that he can lead a team in targets. Darren Waller the year prior, he actually goes out there and in 16 games, 145 targets. It's 9 targets a game. So we have examples in the past of Darren Waller when there are no weapons in his offense. You are able to see a player that can lead the team in targets. Now, of course, I can't sit here and say, you know what, Darren Waller is the same player that he was in 2020. Yes, we should go through and we should draft him as a top 3 tight end as he was then. Hell to the no. I can't try to sell you on Darren Waller being a top 3 tight end because now Darren Waller is older than he was. Darren Waller's definitely showed that he's slowing down over the past 2 years, and over the past 2 years, he has missed a significant amount of time. He missed 6 games in 2021, and he missed 8 games in 2022. You see the receiving yards per game go down from 75 in 2020 to 60 in 2021, and then we can just pull this back up, and 43 in 2022. So Darren Waller has been on the straight decline. I have to be the first person to admit that, but if we have to go through every scenario that Darren Waller could have found himself playing in this upcoming season, I would make the argument that the New York Giants would probably be the best out of all of them. Because what I want to do real quick is pull up this New York Giants depth chart. Let's see the target competition you are going to have for Darren Waller here, because we've seen before when Darren Waller doesn't have target competition, the man can be the number one target in an offense. So here, if we're going to be looking at this, Richie James, nobody. Darius Slayton, nobody. Isaiah Hodgins, nobody. Really, the only guy that I would be quote unquote concerned about here would actually be Wan'Dale Robinson, who flashed as a rookie this past year, but Wan'Dale gets injured later on in the season, tears his knee up. So I'm going to operate under the assumption that Darren Waller will not have to face target competition from Wan'Dale Robinson at the beginning of the year. This looks on paper to be one of the worst wide receiver cores in the NFL. Now, of course, there's a chance that something changes. Let's go ahead and let's pull up this next thing. I want to be looking at the NFL draft order for the first round here, because in my mind, even if you go out there and you trade that 3rd round pick for Darren Waller, I think if you're the New York Giants, you are still highly incentivized to try to come away with the wide receiver. And if we're going to be looking at them at pick 26, they're not going to have every wide receiver available to them. They are not going to be able to come away with Quentin Johnston. We know pretty much every single mock draft has Quentin Johnston as like a top 15 draft pick, but there is an outside chance that you end up getting Jackson Smith-Njigba falling to 26, given the fact that JSN, in my mind, will be a better fantasy asset than real life player. We know that teams really don't like to go after those slot wide receivers, even if they were hyper productive in college. Not saying that JSN's just a slot wide receiver, but he doesn't have the speed to stretch NFL defenses. We saw the same thing 2 years ago when Amon-Ra St. Brown fell to the 4th round for the Detroit Lions. Not saying JSN's falling to day 3, of course, but I do think Jackson Smith-Njigba could fall to the end of round 1 for the New York Giants there. And then if we are also going to be looking at Jordan Addison, I did not think Addison had a shot to make it to pick 26 until his NFL Combine, when Addison was smaller than expected and slower than expected. I think there's an outside chance the Giants could go Jordan Addison at 26. I think if he were to fall, they would take him. The question is, does he actually fall that far? You also have some other guys like maybe Jalen Hyatt, but in my mind, that doesn't make too much of a fit, since you have Zay Flowers. I think Flowers could come in and kind of be the poor man's Jackson Smith-Njigba in my mind. But as it stands today, Darren Waller should probably be the number 1 pass catcher for the New York Giants, even if he is significantly worse than where he was 2 years ago. I personally, I'm going to have to go to flockfantasy.com. I'm going to have to update my rankings. I will have to move Darren Waller up just a bit. Don't want to get too excited, but I do think this locks him into probably being a top 10 tight end this upcoming season, probably closer to about the tight end 6, tight end 7, where previously I thought with the Raiders, he was going to be someone that was possibly not even a tight end 1. But thank you again, ladies and gentlemen, for coming out, hanging out with us in this live stream. I was thinking about getting an underdog draft underway, but we'll probably do that a little later on. If you haven't done so already, drop a like. Go make an account on flockfantasy.com with promo code FLOCK. Get a 2-day free trial the second that you create that account. But thank you. Appreciate you. Hope you have a great day. And hopefully we get some more news later today so we can go live again.